We are live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Police Off the Cuff After Hours. My name is Mark DeMeo. I'm your host. I'm here with my co-host, my partner in all things law enforcement, the very handsome Bill Cannon. What's up, Bill?
Hey, I'm so looking forward to this. I just have to let everyone know that Burt Ross is related to me. He told me to put that disclaimer out, so I'm not too friendly with him, that if I got to bust his balls, I'm going to do it, even though he's my wife's uncle, and I've known him for 30-something years. So he gets no play here. If you want to go in for the kill, go ahead.
Well, our guest, we got a special guest tonight. This is going to be interesting. I'm very excited about it. Our guest, at the age of 28, became the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, and not long after that, he was offered a bribe by the Mafia to build some property over there, a mini mall, and the rest is he's going to tell us about. There was a book written about it. It's called The Bribe. His brother wrote it, and let's welcome Burt Ross. How are you?
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Billy. Good to be here.
You know, Burt, Phil said he's the much handsome brother than you. I don't know if you want to address that.
Well, since he's your father-in-law, I would say absolutely yes, and his daughter takes after him.
I know you. Let's start from the beginning of how you even you ran for mayor at a very, very young age. I know that we're talking about the 70s right now, and back then people got older quicker, but still 28, and when you were first talked into running, you were much younger than that. You were 24, I think, but you're educated. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was raised in Teaneck, New Jersey, a suburb of New York City. Went to a friend's boarding school in Bucks County called George School, went off to Harvard, went from there to NYU Law School, never practiced law, worked on Wall Street, and then during my stay at Wall Street, I ran for mayor and was elected at 28, which was at that time the youngest mayor in the country.
Wow. What happened with Wall Street? Why didn't that work with you?
I made money. It just wasn't fulfilling enough, so I wanted to do other things.
You know, Burt, one of the things I have to get out of the way, because this is an unbelievably iconic photograph. And I mean, this is like taking a picture with Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth, and I'm going to put it on the screen right there. You want to tell us how you came in contact with Dr. King?
I was president of the Harvard-Radcliffe Young Democratic Club, and we hosted a great many speakers. Dr. King was gracious enough to come to Harvard to speak, and I was his host. I, at the time, had a roommate, T.D. Pauly, who was African-American, I assume still is. And
I think he's changed.
Well, he can be on Michael Jackson. What do I know? Got lighter by the year. And we went to the airport, Logan Airport in Boston, to pick up Dr. King. I had this tiny little car. And I said to TD, because TD knew that Dr. King and he belonged to the same fraternity, I said, TD, don't start with the damn handshakes, the secret handshakes. This is Dr. Martin Luther King, the Nobel Prize winner. Come on, man. I introduced the two of them, and within seconds, they're doing the secret handshake. And I said, Dr. King, could you show that to me, please? And he laughed and said, no.
You know, as a white boy, I never understood how to do those handshakes either.
No.
You had Dr. Martin Luther King in your car?
Yeah. It was more than that. After dinner, he wanted, before he spoke, he had an aide who came up to me and said, Dr. King likes to relax a little bit before he speaks. Do you have a place he can go? And he actually took a nap in my bed in the door for half an hour. And then I drove him to the train station. After his talk, we skidded on some ice, and all I could see was Dr. King killed in car accident at the very bottom. The schmuck who drove the car was a student named Burt Ross,
What year are we talking about here?
I think 1964. 4 years, around 4 years before he was assassinated.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
How did that affect you when he was assassinated?
I think after John Kennedy's death, it just was, we were all drained emotionally. And then, of course, very shortly thereafter, Bob Kennedy. it's just hard to process even today. It's just depressing to look back on things like that.
You know, Bill and I, we both retired from the NYPD. We both worked 9/11. I think we feel the same way about that. And right now we're going through a period with the pandemic. I think most people that are going to look back about this time also too, not really. But that time that you lived through was, like you said, you were numb almost, I would imagine.
Yeah. I remember all three deaths. They're just a horrible, I think all within a few years. I saw John Kennedy at a Harvard football game, President Kennedy, 2 weeks, I think, before he got assassinated. He was below me. He had good seats. I did not. Nosebleed section. And he was smoking a stogie, and the Harvard band played Hit the Road, Jack, and Don't Come Back. And there was no laughter from the presidential group. So they immediately switched to Hail to the Chief. And he smiled. And unfortunately, never came back.
You know, I actually had a chance to stand right next to John F. Kennedy Jr. We were filming something in Central Park. It was like the first time I ever worked in a film. And he was just walking through the park, and the whole film shut down. Yeah, and they all went and they gathered around him. He actually wanted to watch the filming, but it was one of those things.
I worked for his brother, Ted Kennedy. I was Ted's first summer intern down in Washington. And he was the youngest person in the Senate. The president was only in office a year or so. So it was heady. I remember preparing something for him that the president read on a plane going up to Hyannis, a report I had done. So anyway.
Now, Burt, let's cut to the chase now. All right. So it's 1971. You got elected to be the mayor of Fort Lee at the age of 28 years old. And at the time, Fort Lee was a Republican city. It was known as heavily, heavily corrupt. It was corrupt all over the place. And you come as this young Democrat, 28 years old. First of all, how were you able to beat all those odds and get elected?
Well, first of all, I had a campaign manager. I don't know if that was his official title, but my brother Phil, your father-in-law, ran a brilliant campaign. I had literally walked the streets. I covered every single house and apartment, town of 35,000 people. There was a scandal in the paper about the people who in office. The former mayor had been a band leader, became mayor and retired as a multimillionaire. So people had enough. But Phil came up with a great slogan because people had been complaining about the high taxes and the high rents and all these high-rise apartment buildings. And so the slogan he came up with was high rises, high taxes, high rents, high time for a change. And I think Phil was high when he wrote it. So we brought in a tremendous number of young people, mostly from out of town. I basically didn't know where City Hall was. I had a bachelor's pad. I was really living in New York City, but my parents were living in Fort Lee, and that's where I voted. And they walked around with a New York phone book showing my name in it. Didn't help them. We not only won, we won in a landslide. We carried 19 out of 20 districts. But what was remarkable about the administration, and I would say that this was unique before, then, and after, the number of young people in important positions. Example, I was 28. We had 2 councilmen. There were only 6 councilmen. 2 were younger than I. The borough attorney was younger than I. The prosecutor was 29. And for instance, I live in Malibu, and they're terrific people on the council. There are 5 people on the council, but I don't think there's anybody under 50. And think of the town that you're in now, and your listeners, and how many people in your local government are under 30 years. And we had a tremendous number and important positions. So we were coming off the 1960s where we believed that young people could really make a change, and we did. When you talk about corruption, let me give you a little example of what we're talking about, because the word today is, especially in social media, is very loosely used. If somebody doesn't agree with you, they're corrupt. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a tax collector who happened to be head of the Republican Party, who literally hadn't filed an income tax in 10 years. We're not talking about didn't pay a tax, didn't file a tax. He went off to jail. The chief of police, I was quoted in the paper. I said, I would like to know why reputed members of the underworld are frequent visitors in the chief of police's office. Now imagine that got a headline. He sued me for libel. We asked him about certain members of the mob who had been frequent visitors in his office. He denied it under oath. We had 6 policemen sign affidavits stating who they were and how many times they had been there. He got arrested. We made a deal. He took his pension and he was out. One of the major Republican players owned the biggest bank in town. All the city money was there collecting zilch, no money at all, no interest. So this is the kind of thing. I was also, it's a long story, but there was a major drug dealer who got off. He had shot up an apartment, resisted arrest, got off scot-free, and people in that town were taken care of, and I know it as a fact. So that's a whole other story. But
that was the environment that you inherited when you got elected mayor.
Yes, I mean
So why did they think that you would play ball with them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a good.
I think it is a good question. Well, they were desperate. The Investors Funding, which was a huge public company, they had at one point owned the Boston Celtics, Ballantine Brewery Company. They had bought this land. I think they assumed that with the Republican administration, it would get rezoned to their liking. They had a tremendous amount of loans outstanding with Chase Manhattan. And they weren't getting anywhere, and they desperately needed to dig the ground and get this. They wanted 3 million square feet of shopping, which would have been a mall right near the George Washington Bridge. We're talking about where Bridgegate occurred, right by the bridge. And it would have created a horror. It would have created a permanent Bridgegate. That's how bad the traffic would have been. And they were desperate. And so what Investors Funding did is they hired 2 members of the mob with a company called Ballantine Electric, a wise guy company. And they said, look, we'll give you the electrical contract for $10 million. It's actually worth $1 million. So they'd make $9 million profit. And so they were desperate. And when they came to me, they weren't thinking of what I had done in the past. They really were anxious to get this going, and they were willing. First of all, they didn't think they were taking a risk. When was the last time, seriously, you guys are in law enforcement, when was the last time a public official was offered a bribe, went to the U.S. Attorney's office and offered to wear a wire? The U.S. Attorney,
the first time I'm ever hearing of anything like this.
What's a sad, it's not a testament to my courage, it's a testament to the lack of integrity of a lot of people in public office. The U.S. Attorney said that he never heard of anybody doing that before. And I saw him a couple of years ago. He said he still hasn't heard of anybody doing it.
Well, that's my question there is like, do you know of anybody else who's done that?
No. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that they weren't taking a risk. The worst that could happen is I would say no. And by the way, the first time the member of the mob visited me, he implied, he was a little subtle. He said, what's your favorite place in the world? And I said, Martha's Vineyard. And he said, you could live very comfortably for the rest of your life in Martha's Vineyard. That's called a veiled bribe. Not enough to convict you, but you know that money is behind it. And that's when I called the next morning. I called the U.S. Attorney. And I told him, no, I'm very comfortable. I don't need it. But they kept coming. They offered me at one point 2 blondes in the Oranges. The Oranges are a group of towns in Essex County, West Orange, South Orange, and Orange. And what he said is there are two gals who can make your hair stand on end. So now, and then they threatened me. They said, we know something about you. We're going to make it public. And this was in a phone call. And I almost broke my wrist hanging up on him. And 10 minutes later, he called back, and that conversation was taped and admitted into evidence in the trial. So they were desperate, and they, for $9 million, they got real desperate. And Chase was about to have their loans pulled, so you can imagine how desperate they were.
That's interesting. There's so many pieces to that too. The Chase part is interesting, because if Chase doesn't get this deal done, then they're probably not going to get the money that's owed to them.
They're worse than that. They're going to owe $50 million. The bank says, you're not building, give us the money. So that's when this all happened, that investors funding, which was on the New York Stock Exchange, went bankrupt. I should have sold the stock short. I would have made my $500,000.
When the actual, well, you had all of these people coming up to you. There was no solid offer yet, but so you went to the U.S. Attorney's office, and at first, you first went to the district attorney's office. They didn't want to do anything.
I never went local. The history of the U.S. Attorney's office in those days was top of the line. You had Lacey, Judge Lacey. He became a federal judge. Had been the U.S. attorney. He was a judge in this case. Judge Stern, who had also been the U.S. attorney, and then Jonathan Goldstein. These were top of the line, real solid U.S. attorneys, and I didn't want to mess locally. And I went to them. The problem is that there was a great degree of skepticism at first, because nobody had ever done this before. And so part of the issue also was that the federal government, because they report to the Justice Department, wasn't prepared. They had no protocol for an honest person turning state's evidence. So they offered me, when I had a death threat, they were going to put me up in a motel outside of Washington, in a halfway house. You remember The Godfather, when they had the guy at the halfway house and they brought his brother in from Italy, and one look and he committed suicide? Well, I'm saying to them, that I didn't do something wrong. You should encourage me. They sent me a bulletproof wardrobe, and inside the bulletproof raincoat, it had not tested for ballistics.
That looks like one of those old NYPD vests that they gave out.
I can't help but recall Serpico, because we're talking about the same time, same type of situation. He was an NYPD detective, and he was looking to, expose corruption, and nobody really knew how to deal with it. Nobody knew how to handle it, and he was people were just closing doors.
Well, he was a phenomenal individual. I'm not in the category of, I think, of Frank Serpico.
I think it's kind of sort of the same story.
I think that the difference when you're dealing with somebody like the guy who played the Donnie Brasco character, or Frank Serpico, they had extended periods of time where their life was really at risk. I had a death threat, but I had a dear friend of mine who knew the mob. And when I called him up and said, "Sonny, is my life at risk?" He said, "No, you're a mayor. They're not going to go after a mayor any more than they're going to go after an FBI agent or a judge."
Yeah, but the similarities of this is that you both could have easily taken the money.
Yes.
It would have been no problem. And yet your moral compass said no.
Yeah. Okay. In that regard, yes. There are always cynics out there. Some people believe that I took the first $500,000 and then got cold feet and turned down the second $500,000. It's a wonderful country. We have people who never can take something on face value. It always has to have a sinister motive.
Yeah, Burt, I had one time I was in Fort Lee with the police department on a job. I forget, we were looking for somebody. And I told one of the cops that I was related to Burt Ross, and he said something exactly similar to that. He goes, "Burt Ross wasn't that honest. They just didn't offer him enough money."
Well, that's funny, because I wore a wire 3 times.
Yeah.
And one time we were in it used to be called the Forum Diner, major successful diner on Route 4 in Paramus, which has since been torn down. And during that, they are about to give me the $100,000, which is a good faith deposit on the $500,000. And I start going for $1 million. And when the U.S. attorney calls me in to do a debriefing, he is not happy. He says, "What are you doing? This is going before a jury, and you're trying to, it sounds like entrapment. You're trying to get them from $500,000 to $1 million." I said, "Jonathan, first of all, I have some pride. I know I can get them to $1 million. And secondly, it sounds real." And he says, "Stop it." So I stopped it. That part of the thing that's strange and is that I was never part of a team. I was their case. Ultimately, 7 people were convicted. And the jury, it was a sequestered jury. The jury, I think the trial lasted like 2.5 weeks. And each defendant was found guilty on 5 counts. And I don't think that jury was out more than 6 hours, which is ridiculous when you think of what happened today. But I forgot the point I was going to make, so who cares? Anyway.
Anyway, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff After Hours. I'm Bill Cannon with Mark DeMeo. This is Burt Ross, who was the youngest mayor in probably U.S. history at the age of 28. He has an incredible story that was memorialized in a book called The Bribe that was actually written by my father-in-law. I admitted in the beginning of the show that I'm related to Burt Ross. Anyway, NYPD Captain, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. All you folks in the super chat, polyester, I love that name. I don't like to wear polyester, but I like that name. Dawn Marie, Factual Breakdown. Of course, the Pranzos are here. Mark Hirsch, you sound like you're a friend of Burt Ross. Christopher Strom.
Sergeant Peter Lavin.
Peter Lavin, Joanne Blasich. Good evening, everyone. Again, this is Police Off the Cuff After Hours. We have Burt Ross on, who is telling this incredible story about an incident very long ago, actually. It's almost 50 years ago, isn't it, Burt?
This November 2nd will be 50 years to the day that I was elected. Wow. I am literally the only living former mayor of Fort Lee. The 3 mayors who followed me have all passed. That's how young I was. They were much older. It's strange because a friend of mine said, "Why don't we have a reunion?" And I thought about it, and I said, "Well, that's wonderful." And then I realized everybody's dead.
I'm here.
It'd be a reunion of 2-3 people. But there is a good side to that, and that is that I can say anything about my administration, and there's nobody to contradict me. So I want to be on record. You've heard it here first. Taxes were reduced 50% while I was mayor. There were no traffic accidents while I was mayor. No divorces. Nobody died, and everybody was happy. And if you believe that, you're my kind of.
Yeah, you should run for office now, Burt, if that was the case.
What's interesting is that you mentioned having Martin Luther King speak at the college and at Harvard, and being a couple of rows up from John F. Kennedy, and these type of influences, I'm sure, had a lot to do with the decision that you made and the choice that you made. And history, when we take a step back and we look back at history, we obviously, even though they did phenomenal things, they were humans. They were slightly flawed. And yet I don't see that in you yet. I'm trying to figure out where yours is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you acted just like they probably would have, or we imagine they would have in those type of situations.
Well, I think you get your values mostly from your parents. I don't think the issue was ever whether I would take the money. That never to this day was contemplated. The real decision was, do I report it? And I think there were a couple of motivating factors. One is it was obvious that they were coming back. They were not going to leave me alone. They needed this property rezoned, and they needed it rezoned quickly. So they weren't going away. And part of that was when Joey called me and threatened me. He said, "We know stuff about you, and I don't like being threatened. That's putting it nicely. I think we all have stuff in our DNA. You don't physically touch me and you don't threaten me, and that's when I didn't care what happened to him. So.
And it was Joey D. Was that Joey Bag of Donuts? Who was that?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because when he came to my apartment the first time, talked about Martha's Vineyard, was carrying, which normally you don't go to the mayor's apartment and with a gun.
When you say carrying, you mean
he was carrying a pistol underneath.
He was strapped.
But I mean, he made sure that you saw it.
I'm not sure he did or not. The thing that was ridiculous is one look at him and he was mob right out of Central Casting. I mean, if you wanted to make a movie, you just put him in. You put him in The Sopranos, he'd fit right in. I mean, he had a scar, the pinky ring. I remember the size of his fingers. The circumference of his fingers were twice mine. But at the very end, because he only introduced himself as Joey, when he left, he said, we'll be in touch. You can call me Joe DiGiacomo. Now, when you say you can call me, that's an alias. And as soon as he left, I called the head of the Board of Adjustment, Ben Mazer, and I said, Ben, have you been approached by some guy? He said, yeah, there was a guy named Joe Green. So he was out, with these aliases. At the first time we met, and I was wearing a wire, he gave me a card. And when I went back to the FBI headquarters and gave them the card and they saw Valentine Electric and his real name, they were thrilled. Oh, we got a wise guy. And they knew the company and they knew, Major League. I wasn't as thrilled, but that's when, by the way, it took all that time for there to be real credibility. You're not part of the team. You're going to be a witness. It's not like an FBI agent's undercover. He's part of the team. He knows exactly what's going on. When I left the diner, and by the way, I got frisked. I was going to go to the bathroom to tell them that they were about to give me the money. And the diner was filled with FBI agents. There were more FBI agents in that diner than anything. He starts to frisk me, and I almost died because where I had worn the wire the time before was where he was frisking me, and this time, fortunately, it was in my belt buckle, not up here. And so I go to the men's room. I check to make sure there's nobody in the stall, and there are two FBI agents listening in a van nearby, and they have photographers out there with fishing equipment, but there are cameras. And I whisper over the urinal, they're going to give me the money now. They're going to give me the money now. And I flush, and all these guys here in the van is Niagara Falls. The sound is magnified. And I go out to the parking lot. He pulls up. He says, get in. He gives me an accordion folder with, by the way, they were nervous too, because one of the developers was there saying, we're going to give it to you in 10s, 20s, and 30s. And I said, if you're going to give it to me in 30s, I don't want to do business with you. So the mob guy is the guy who is giving me the money in the car. He says, you want to count it? I don't want my fingerprints on it. So I say, you'll be hearing from me if you're sure. I then get into my car and I drive. I want to make sure I'm not followed. They said, I said, what happens if they ask me to go with them? They said, go with them. We'll follow you with a helicopter. Fortunately, they didn't ask me to go anywhere. They did it in the parking lot. So I'm driving around side streets, making sure nobody's following me. I go to FBI headquarters. They count the money. They bet me that they'll be short. They were wrong. It was exactly $100,000, and I got $1 and a receipt from the FBI that I had received $100,000. That I had received $100,000. What am I going to do with the receipt? I put it in the icebox, literally. They had like 12 guys. It was a Memorial Day, 12 agents with plastic gloves, all counting. But the point I'm making is, I had no idea what was happening. If I had been an FBI agent, I had to go to a wedding that afternoon. And I finally reached Jonathan, the U.S. attorney. I said, did you arrest them? You've got everything. You've got the tape. You've got the money. He said, no, we have to send the money down to be to be looked at down in Washington and have to see how the sound came out. But I had to call them. I'm not part of the team. So one time I got back at them. Now, these are guys, young guys with families, the entire U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're working 24/7. And about a day before the trial, they call me in, and you could see they are in panic mode. They said, we're going to ask you, Burt, we're going to ask you a question. We want an honest answer, no equivocation. Were you in an institution in 1968?
Yeah, you were.
And I thought, now I have them by the Guyons. And it's my time, since I'm not part of their team, they're not going to be part of my team. And it's a long pause, and they are dying. And I said, yes. And their face, that's the end of it, their cases. I said, I think you would probably agree that NYU Law School was an institution.
It's an institution.
They wanted to kill me. But the relief was so great, they couldn't. They started to laugh. I said, and you can check that out. And I said, what would happen if there was another Burt Ross in a mental institution? They said they would all lose their license, law license.
Oh, wow.
There were so many interesting stories. I got called right before the trial. The judge was 6'5". He's in his 90s now. Honest, tough Irish, real, pure, tough, honest guy. Deep voice. And he called me. Somebody came and said, the judge wants to see you in his chamber. This is federal court now. We're not, judge wants to see you in his chambers. He brought me in and he said, Mayor, you are not to enter my courtroom with the U.S. Marshals who are guarding you. It wasn't a conversation. I said, yes, Your Honor. He was terrific, though. And we had met a couple of days before in the chambers with the U.S. attorney, and we practiced examination, being on the witness stand. And then he also said, let's talk about where we put the $100,000. And they decided to put it right in front of the jury. So when they do that, the lawyers during the trial go crazy, absolutely nuts. Prejudice. They get the jury out, and they're making all kinds of motions. And the judge says, well, I'm a little confused. It sounds like you have two concerns. One, that this money would be in better hands with your clients than with the court. Denied on that ground. The second ground is that it's prejudicial. It may very well be, but what we call it in this court is evidence. Motion denied. Jury comes back. When they would call me Ross, he would always address me as mayor. And the one time, one of the mob attorneys didn't like the answer to a question. And he went, oh, come on. Judge bangs the gavel. Says, Mr. Richter, if you don't like the answer, don't ask the question. It's not your job, isn't to decide whether you like the answer or not. That's why we have the jury. Let's
take a quick break and go to. We got to do a little commercial break.
Also, let's thank Gaspar Ramirez. Thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Also, Dawn Marie. Someone else gave us a $9.99 super chat. Sandra Rivera, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat.
Hi,
and of course, NYPD Captain. We're gonna go to a quick commercial right now. I'll do the first one, and Mark, you could do the. Folks, if you're getting sick and tired of the high taxes in New York, and you're tired of a lot of things in New York, and you want to move down south, Carol Waters sells real estate down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She was actually a bartender at the Fitzpatrick Hotel for 20 years here in Midtown. Her husband, Rob Mahan, was on the NYPD, and then he rolled over to the fire department. Together, they're a great real estate team down in Myrtle Beach. In fact, they're in part of the $1 Million Sales Club. So if you want to buy some real estate down in Myrtle Beach, whether it's a vacation home or a permanent home, give Carol Waters a call, 261-6681, or you can email her, carolwatersellsmb@gmail.com.
Hey, if you're a fan of Police Off the Cuff, you definitely know what I'm going to talk about right now. One of our frequent guests is Joe Murray. He's a retired NYPD cop, and he's also an attorney at law, a great attorney at law. He's got a practice right there in Queens in Great Neck Road. If you get in trouble, if you need a lawyer, if you have any questions regarding law, give jmurray/law.com. Send him an email. The phone number is there, 646-838-1702. He's a proud sponsor of the show here, Police Off the Cuff. He's a frequent guest. He's our law expert, and he's a great attorney. So please, I keep the number right in my phone. I call them every day just to check in. I want to make sure it's at the top of my my call list right there. So jmurray/law.com.
Burt, I wanted to ask now, okay, so you put, what was it, 5 to 6 people away for I think most of them got like 5 years. One got maybe 6 months or something like that. What was talk about the fear you had for your life and how you dealt with that?
Well, let me just amplify one thing. Judge Lacey sentenced them, almost all of them, to 5 years. He went out on vacation. They brought a motion before another federal judge, Curtis Meaner. Curtis Meaner reduced all their sentences to 6 months. Judge Lacey was quoted in the New York Times front page as apparently my brother judge doesn't feel as strongly about political corruption. I wasn't concerned for my life after the trial. I really wasn't concerned most of the time, even before. I think the thing there was a death threat, and the U.S. attorney made it clear that he didn't want me going back to Fort Lee. Now, that's a perfect example where they don't have a protocol for an honest person in public office. They actually offered me the witness protection program. And I said, are you going to put me up in Malibu, which is where I live now? And they laughed. And it would be like Goodfellas. I mean, I'd be, getting the
Burt, someone in the chat said, Paul Grisanti says, looking forward to our breakfast on Sunday, Burt. Love the first 36 minutes.
Hey, that is the mayor of Malibu. Wow. And a good man, Mayor Grisanti, really good person.
Yeah, but an interesting point is this, that they're treating you like you were actually the perp in this.
Yeah, they don't have a protocol. So he wanted me out of town. There was a primary election. I wanted to go back, and he said he had met Phil, I think, at some point, and he said, let me talk to your brother. This is in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And he spoke to Phil, and he said, get your brother out of town. It's the last place we want him.
But you're the mayor right now. How are you supposed to be the mayor from out of town?
Well, it was the summer. The trial was supposed to be in September. So for 2-3 months, we only met once a month during the summer, the council, and we have an acting mayor. So everybody was fine with that. The problem was, and again, I'm not hearing from the U.S. attorney during the summer preparing for the trial. I'm out of town, in hiding, under an alias. We'll get to that in a minute. And I don't know what's happening. So finally, I talked to I'd say it's early July. I said, I'm a lawyer by education. That doesn't make sense. Your main witness and the trial's in a couple months and you haven't called me back. And the assistant U.S. attorney said, turn on the radio tomorrow. I turned it on, the top of the news, 4 or 5 other guys one of the guys turned state's evidence, one of the developers, not the mob guy, and implicated 4 or 5 other people. And then they postponed the trial to March. Now, you would think that not only would I go back, I'll get to that photo in a minute but that they would protect me. They refused to protect a sitting mayor who'd done the right thing. They said, we'll give you a bulletproof wardrobe. We'll show some force at the very beginning, but then you're on your own. So what happened is that photo was me with the governor, and it was embarrassing. I came back. By the way, I'd grown a beard. My secretary didn't recognize me when I came back. I was hysterical. And that's Governor Brendan Byrne, and that's a state trooper behind him. He had one state trooper. What you don't see was there were U.S. Marshals on rooftops. It was a dedication of a police building. And it was embarrassing to have that much protection when the governor did not. After a short time, and the protection was you couldn't get into City Hall without going through a metal detector. There was a U.S. Marshal sitting behind me, looking both ways constantly. It was the shortest, I guarantee you it was the shortest. The first time back was the shortest meeting in the history of Fort Lee or almost any other town. We adopted the minutes, pledged allegiance to the flag, and somebody moved to adjourn. We were all sitting with bulletproof vests. Then the marshals left. The Fort Lee police volunteered. The police then we started when I was mayor about 62 people. We went up to around 94, 50% increase. I had a very good relationship with the police, and they started to protect me. And it was awkward. We'd go to a friend's house. They'd search the apartment. One guy would be out on the balcony. After a while, I said, the taxpayers should not be footing the bill. I'll be on my own. And I was on my own. The only time there was anything that was threatening, that was slightly threatening, was somebody long after the trial made some comments. I called the U.S. attorney and they picked him up off the street and they never saw the guy again. I'm sure they read him the Riot Act. But I don't know. Anyway.
What was the ripple effect?
Go ahead, Bo. I'm sorry.
What was the ripple effect in regards to, like, because you have a picture there with Brendan Byrne, and apparently he was because the Brendan Byrne Arena. So we know that
he was a governor.
The ripple effect amongst other politicians. How are they looking at you? They must be looking at you like, what are you doing?
Yeah, most of them did not like it. Most of them were displeased with me. When I ran in a primary for Congress, they put me out of column. The head of the Democratic Party at the time in Bergen County was ultimately disbarred for his relationship with the mob. Billy Musto, who was a state senator and I think maybe mayor of Union City, which was in the district at the time, ended up in federal prison. So there were many mayors who were not very happy with me at all. Look, c'est la vie.
That's an interesting
Brendan Byrne appointed me to be the head of the energy office. I left being mayor. I had a 4-year term, and I left with 3 months to go and became they called it the energy czar, and was quite influential in getting the state to pass right turn on red light, which is a whole other story.
What was the other office that you ran for? You ran for Congress?
I ran for Congress in a primary. I had a great theory. And when I have a great theory, it's almost always wrong. In those days, most presidents got reelected. So Jimmy Carter was president. He was running for reelection. Ronald Reagan was considered far right, and it looked like he would probably go the way of Barry Goldwater, who lost to Johnson in a massive landslide. And so I figured it would be a good time to run as a Democrat. Fortunately, I lost the primary very narrowly, by the way. I was within 100 votes of Bergen County, and I lost. I carried two cities in Hudson County, but I lost Union City by 1,800, and that was the difference. And there wasn't a single, literally not a single Republican incumbent in 1980 who lost. So the guy who won went off and borrowed a ton of money and lost. He lost by 40,000. I told him I thought I would have done much better. I would have lost by maybe 32,000.
Bill, go ahead.
The book is The Bribe. You can get it on Amazon. And to be totally honest, it's written by my father-in-law. So these guys, they could use some money in their older years, So buy Phil Ross's book, and it was written about his brother Burt, who we have on the show right now. But one of the things too that's fascinating is that you got out of politics and you went into commercial real estate, and you were very, very successful. You want to talk about that a bit?
That's pretty boring.
Well, not if you like money.
Are you telling me the people who are watching your podcast are interested in money?
Well, they would like to know what you did after you retired from politics at such a young age, or in your early 30s, right?
I bought commercial buildings, offices and warehouses in Bergen County. I sold most of them. Did very well. I still own two, a warehouse in Richfield and an office building in Teaneck. But there's nothing soulful about that. We all make money different ways, and I'm not unhappy about it. I mean, it afforded me the opportunity to live in a town like Malibu, which I absolutely love. So yeah, I'm not complaining, but
well, Burt, do you go surfing every morning?
Oh, actually, we have a rented house, and we have if I weren't lazy, I could take this and show you Surfrider Beach.
Let me ask you a question about what's going on right now. Since I'm looking at the time and all this stuff is going on, and this obviously nothing's changed as far as corruption. What do you think about what's going on right now?
Can you be a little more?
Well, let's just talk it. All the progressive movement, because here's the thing: you're talking to two cops right now, and this defund the police. It really took us for a loop, and now all of a sudden it seems
moronic. It's a moronic term.
Well, if you look at
the police, is I'm sure you can find idiots who espouse any position in the world. I mean, we even have a congresswoman who says that the Jews are sending lasers from outer space to cause fires in California. I mean, so to defund the police on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of idiocy, 1 being the 100 being the greatest idiocy, that's right up there. I think intelligent people would like to see that it's done in a way where certain situations don't involve a police officer necessarily, or they're given the backup so they understand when somebody is having an epileptic fit or something like that.
Well, in all fairness, those are jobs that are giving, at least to the NYPD and probably most departments. And when you're talking about handling people with emotionally disturbed people, and those are jobs that are somehow given to the police departments, but not necessarily wanted by the police department.
Yes, and
nobody else wants to do it. So you're talking about reimagining policing, and I don't think there's a cop out there who would mind not going to an EDP case.
Yeah.
But the problem is all the other stuff that goes with it, and you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. And again, I think the expression of defunding, which means take money, it sounds like do away with the police department. Well, anybody who says that, I was on a podcast once where somebody was against regulation. Government's too much regulation. I said, well, do you think any regulation is good? No. I said, so you don't care if somebody puts PCBs in the drinking water? Nah. I said, end the conversation. So if somebody says, get rid of the police department, by the way, New York has just elected somebody. I don't know anything about him other than for the first time.
They didn't elect him. He won the primary.
In New York, my understanding is that you have to go back to John Lindsay, I think.
No, what I'm saying is that he didn't win yet. There's this misconception that Eric Adams won. He's going to be mayor. No, he has to go against Curtis Sliwa. He won the Democratic primary.
Okay.
And there's going to be a moment in the summer where somebody's going to ask him, are you going to hire more cops? And Curtis Sliwa is going to go, yes. And if he doesn't say yes, he might not win.
Well, my understanding, because I know nothing about the guy who won the primary, other than I heard him I don't even know on what station, but I heard him for like 30 seconds. And when they said, what is your number one responsibility? His answer was protecting the public. So anybody who feels that as a mayor, there's nothing to talk about. So defunding the police, getting rid of the police force is a non-starter. That's not a conversation. That's some idiots need to go somewhere and have that conversation. I don't think most intelligent people believe you should get rid of I don't think most people, period. And by the way, in a liberal city like New York, in a Democratic primary, the public spoke, and based on that 30-second clip, they wanted somebody.
You talk about the collateral damage that was involved in people coming to this decision, because we were on defund the police until every city had. We just had 100 freaking homicides in Chicago, like over a weekend. You know what I'm saying? Like, so shootings.
100 shootings. Yeah.
100 shootings.
Yeah. So my point is this: it took all these because now they try to flip the script and say that it was the Republicans somehow behind the fund the police, and then they had to create a video to show every single person saying
everything has been Mark. Everything. I've never seen partisanship like it is.
I know.
We have a health crisis, and we can't. I assume you've gotten vaccinated.
Yeah.
Yes, I know Billy has.
That's for my gigs, though.
What?
I had to do it for my gigs.
Well, how about doing it so that you won't die? That's a good reason too.
Well, that's a good reason. Yeah, but I know. But listen, I have no problem with. Listen, I think at some point, if you're an adult, you have to make your decision.
No. And here's the problem. I don't agree with that at all.
Well, I love the fact that you don't.
Wait. Well, no, I have no problem with your making a decision so long as your decision doesn't impact my health or my loved ones. If you want to go off and shoot yourself, that's your problem. You want to not be vaccinated and pass this on where we're going to have to close economies again because 45% of the country won't get vaccinated? If I were president, you couldn't get on an airline. You couldn't get into college without showing proof of vaccination. We can wipe this thing out. And this has been made into a partisan thing. And this is horrible. And police, you see, everything is being made into a binary choice. You are for the police or you're for Black Lives Matter. No, bullshit. You can be for the rights of people and for good, solid funding of police departments. It's not, everything isn't a choice. Everything is expensive.
Before, not to go off track, but Duty Ron asked you, he gave a $10 super chat. So I have to ask you, Bill, can Burt squash my ticket in Fort Lee?
I don't think so. I think that's why
he left. I didn't do it then.
I think that's why he left Fort Lee to begin with.
I'm going to tell you something right now. What I love about what you said is that I love these conversations. I love debates. I love hearing other people's opinion. If it makes sense, I'm easily swayed. I'm not in one camp or the other. If it makes sense, I'm easily swayed. And that's what we're missing right now. We're missing conversation. We're missing an open gate for common sense and to change your. You made a complete sense to me.
Mark, you're a police officer. If somebody goes through a red light, you arrest them.
Well, I give them a summons. Yeah.
Well, give them a summons. Okay. If they're now, is it the driver's choice to go through a red light or not? No, it's the law. Why? Because if he goes through a red light, somebody else is going to get hurt. So the issue when you have a regulation or a law, a prohibition, a mandate, it should depend on whether it simply affects you or it affects other people. I had polio when I was a kid. I spent 5 months in a hospital. Thank God they came up with the vaccine 5 years after I had polio. And my children got that shot when they were kids, and they never got polio. I don't want my kids going to a school where half the kids decide, their parents decide. No, I'm not going to give it's my choice. No.
But you know, Burt, there are people that look. I got vaccinated. I believe that was the right way to go. But there are anti-vaxxers. There's even people that don't vaccinate their kids for school, which I find to be crazy,
horrible.
But I mean, I don't know how. I don't know if you want government forcing people to do certain things because that can look. It's just like Beto O'Rourke.
Do you want your kids, when your kids were little, your little boys, to go to a school where half the kids didn't have a vaccine for measles? Are you kidding me?
No. Of course I would want that. But
No,
there are people that are anti-vaxxers, and it's
fuck
like,
them.
yeah.
Fuck them. As a kid, I had pneumonia, measles, chickenpox, mumps, and polio. And today they don't have any of them. So let's get real. Everything isn't a matter of choice. If it impacts other people. Mark, you got young kids? Did you have young kids?
Yeah, the 24 and 21.
Okay. When they were little kids, would you send them to a school where half the people weren't vaccinated for some of these diseases?
No, listen, I tell you, man, I love your argument. I really do. There's, and you're winning me over. There's a couple of parts of me, like, okay, so for example, how do we enforce this? Because right now we're talking about going door to door and asking people suggestions. Why not get vaccinated? Let's just say, what's the next level of that? Dragging somebody out of the house, shooting them?
Nobody. Look, I'm just
saying. Like,
I listen to Tucker Carlson too. Come on.
No, I'm giving you an.
Here's how you do it. I had it laminated, proof of my vaccine.
I have mine in my thing.
Bert, I have it in my phone. That's the way we do things these days.
Big shot. Podcast. From another generation. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't. It was amazing. I don't even think we had cars when I was growing up. What the hell? Anyway, the first car was $2,500. Anyway, in order to get on a plane, you show them that. Otherwise, you stay grounded. You want to go to a college? I guarantee you, without even knowing, that Harvard has a system, and I would be amazed if I'm not talking about people who have immune suppression and for medical reasons can't get the vaccine.
Well, I'm gonna help your argument here, and here's the reason why your argument holds water, is because we are going through, well, at least in New York, there's parts of the United. Listen, other countries right now are in the Delta virus, the other one that came. It's like it just never ends. Just all of them,
they're dying. There are countries. I had a roommate from college.
Malaysia is they just can't get rid of it. So we're on we're doing well right now. But
we're well in that we have the supply. Yeah. We're not doing well in that we went from almost 4 million cases down to 4 million vaccinations a day to 400,000. It's starting to become a trickle. And every day, I look at a site called Worldometer. I look at every country, and then I look at every state in the country. And we're starting to go in the wrong direction.
But
yeah, go ahead.
How much of it has to do with the fact that whether you like the last president or not, he's talking about some lights and injecting shit into you, and then the pills that you should take. Both of those things, it turns out, even though he didn't articulate it well, and it sounded like a moron saying whatever he was saying, both were trashed, and both turned out to be things that could help you if you did get sick.
Okay. You go to your doctor, not Fox, not Tucker Carlson. Go to your doctor and ask that doctor if that's what he suggests. That's not what the former president took when he was in the hospital. And he got COVID and was seriously ill. Maryland just recently announced that every single person who has died recently of COVID was unvaccinated. We're talking of, and more younger people.
Before the vaccination, there were like, you talk about the bipartisan breaking. You can't get an honest opinion, and that's
you can. It depends on whom you're willing to listen to. If you're willing,
of course.
If you have doctors who have been in the field of these kind of viruses for their entire lives. They had some guy on Fox for months. They finally got rid of him. Who, I don't know, he was a gynecologist. He had nothing to do with this field. So let's be real. Let's make life simple. If you get vaccinated, your chances of being hospitalized or dying are minimal. Period.
I hope so.
Don't die on us, Bert.
Don't die on us. Hey, Bill, man, I love your uncle.
He's my wife's uncle.
Your uncle-in-law.
That's what I am, Uncle. By the way, Billy is good.
This is the way it should be. You should be able to have a conversation.
See, I already covered this during Thanksgiving and other talks. So but anyway, Bert, we're at an hour. Your story was fascinating. I want to thank some of the people in our chat, of course. Duty Ron, thank you so much for those super chats. Michael Thomas, thank you for your $5 super chat. I got to go back into the whole Duty Ron twice. Steve Cologne, thank you so much for your $9.99 super chat. Jesse S6, thank you so much. Again, Duty Ron, you guys are hitting us up here. Guys, we're starting to grow. We actually, in the last 2 weeks, we added 3,000 new subscribers. And we're hoping that we can keep growing because we're bringing you some outstanding material, some great guests, such as Burt Ross here. We're doing some real crime shows, and people are really catching on to Police Off the Cuff. When we do our real crime shows, it's from a police perspective. I want to thank Duty Ron, who's helped our channel unbelievably, pointing us in the right direction.
Thank you, Duty Ron.
Yeah, he's helped us unbelievably. And, from a police perspective, you see a lot of these internet sleuths that don't know what they're talking about, and they just spread rumors on certain cases. But we've done these investigations. We know what's required in these investigations. We know how they should be going, and we give our real, basically a schooled opinion, and we have other experts on the shows with us. So we want to thank all of you folks. We have a website now, policeoffthecuff.com. If you really like this show, first of all, subscribe on YouTube. Second of all, join our Patreon. We have 3 levels on our Patreon. You pay for X amount a month, and you get some other stuff that we don't give to everyone. We give other content, and you get to be part of the Police Off the Cuff family. Any final words, Mark?
Yeah, I just want to say, Burt, man, it was an honor.
Hey, thanks meeting you
last night, and I got to tell you, man, I'm so impressed. You're the real deal. You're a man's man. You walk the walk, you talk the talk, and I admire you. Thanks for you.
Thank you, Mark. And Billy, see you in a month.
That's right. And you have any final words to say, Burt? You want to say hello to Malibu? You want to say hello to Fort Lee? You want to say hello to Englewood?
No, I want you to give your better half a hug.
I will do.
Be well. Nice talking to you guys.
All you Police Off the Cuff fans, this is Bill Cannon and Mark DeMeo for Police Off the Cuff After Hours. Thank you so much for listening, and good night.